There you are. This is the ugliest, most beautiful thing to ever exist. We all have it. We all have that one console that changed our lives growing up. Mine was the PS2. This was the first console that I owned myself. I mean, I didn't buy it. It was given to me as a Christmas gift by my parents. But like previous to that, you know, I had a PlayStation 1 in the house and stuff like that, but it was the family PlayStation. Well, it was my dad's basically, and I just used to play them. So this was the first one that was mine, and what a console to like experience as my first console. It's so ugly, but so goddamn beautiful. Who remembers this bit at the back, the expansion bay? This was an incredible place to hide things from your parents. I've actually got no idea what goes in there either. Did they ever release anything for it? Who remembers the added touch of being able to spin around the logo if you had it stood or if you had it flat? Anyway, there's something timeless about the PS2 era. You see, we were at the dawn of the internet back then. So we were constantly influenced by the overload of information that was being given to us on the internet, telling us what games were good, what games were bad. It was a special time for video games because the technological movement was on the march. Things were improving. I remember the first time I played a PS2 game and I could not believe the graphics. And like compared to graphics now, they look ridiculous, but at the time it was like, how the hell does this look so good? Discs, I mean, soon enough discs will not even be a tangible thing that people can hold anymore. I saw a thing recently where some study had been done and it was like X%, a big percent of kids now prefer to play their games on iPads or mobile phones. And I just thought, what a bullshit dumb piece of research that is. They're kids. They don't have consoles yet. They don't have PCs yet. Every parent trying to get something done is like, here's this iPad, play Roblox so I can watch Maury Povich or whatever parents watch. It's because they don't know yet, because all those kids are one day gonna have PCs and be like, fucking hell. Anyway, I'm going off topic. Nowadays, if you want to find like a hidden gem of a game, you usually find it on itch.io or it's some obscure indie game. Corners of the market still existed where strange and wonderful games were able to be created. I felt like developers had less restrictions, or at least they were less guided by market trends. I mean, how many times do we see now big developers trying to make things like live service games because they saw that Fortnite did it really well and made billions of dollars from it? They failed time and time again. It meant that weird games like Total Override could be created, or Area 51, which neither of these are actually on this list that we're going to talk about today, but both of these need special mentions. I remember on a weekend we would go to Blockbuster. My mum and dad would pick up a couple films to watch over the weekend and I'd pick up a game, and that's how I discovered my games. I wasn't guided by the internet or guided by anyone else's opinion. I was guided by the front cover and the few pictures that were on the back of the case. And it meant that you could stumble upon a game that clicked with you and only you. So today, we're going deep, unearthing 10 PS2 gems. Games that didn't sell by the millions, but linger in memory. Some for being a little weirder, some for being a little bolder, and some for just not getting the credit that they deserve. Number 10 is Black. Now, Black came out like at the back end of the PS2 cycle. PS3 and the Xbox 360 were already out at this point, but some of us were still playing the PS2. And I used to dream about having a PS3. All my friends were getting Xbox 360s, and looking back, that's probably the route I should have gone down. But as a massive Metal Gear Solid fan, I couldn't not have the console where the next Metal Gear Solid was going to arrive. But in the meantime of dreaming, I played Black. And Black felt to me like a next generation game, even though it was still on the PS2. You know what a young mind is like, you imagine things. And I used to imagine that I was playing this thing on a PS3. It's the only game that did that for me. It felt like it was beyond the capabilities of the PS2. You were blasting through bullet-riddled environments that crumbled realistically. And that's what Black was, a first-person shooter that leaned into cinematic destruction. The enemy AI, even for its time, wasn't great. The story wasn't great. The video game itself just felt a lot of fun to play. And actually, aside from tanky controls, I think Black even today still holds up. Number 9 is the Mark of Kri. Now, I know that I've framed a lot of this video around nostalgia, but I actually didn't ever own the Mark of Kri. I played this game last year for the first time, and I can't believe how much I enjoyed it. There was something about playing a game from that generation for the first time later on in your life and still being able to enjoy it, because like I said about Black, back with the controls feeling a bit off. I mean, the controls for any game on the PS2 are never going to feel quite right. But when the gameplay and the style transcends how that feels, I mean, that's a gem in itself. So yeah, I played this on the PlayStation Store in the Classics section. And it initially stood out to me because it doesn't look like anything else from its time. It uses hand-drawn, almost storybook style visuals that move with brushstroke elegance. You play as Rao, a warrior armed with brutal melee weapons. And the combat has this like unique lock-on system where if there's a pack of enemies around you, say there's 3 enemies around you, the one furthest left will be attackable by using the square button, the one furthest right will be attackable using circle, and the one in the middle will be attackable using triangle. It's a weird system and I wouldn't expect it to be in a video game today, but it was unique and not in a clunky way. It felt fine, it felt good to play. You also had Kuzo, who's your raven companion, could send Kuzo up into the air to scout out what was ahead and plan how you were going to approach situations. The game mixes stealth, exploration, and vicious combat, all while pulling from Polynesian mythology to give it something, I don't know, just a unique flavour. Even though I'd never even heard of this game, critics at the time praised the game for being visionary, and it remains one of those PS2 exclusives that feels like it was kind of born from one of these weird, strange corners of the gaming world that really don't exist outside of indies anymore. Number 8 is The Suffering. This game is horror at its rawest. Everybody talks about your Resident Evils and your Silent Hills, but this was the horror game I had. You play as Talk, a prisoner on death row whose penitentiary suddenly, inexplainably, for absolutely no reason, erupts with nightmarish monsters. Why? I don't know. The creatures weren't just generic beasts, they were designed by Hollywood legend Stan Winston. Every corridor feels oppressive, every shadow carries dread, and the game constantly forces you to question what's real and what's Talk's own madness. It's gruesome and it's violent, but it doesn't lean on cheap scares. Instead, it builds this suffocating atmosphere where every step feels genuinely dangerous. Number 7 is The Bouncer. Now, growing up, my cousin always had the latest console before I did. So before I got my PS2, the only way for me to experience this wondrous majesty of graphical insanity was to play the games at my cousin's house. So The Bouncer I actually discovered before I owned a PS2. Anyway, we used to play this game all the time, and then when I got it, me and my friend Liam used to continue to play this game all the time. The Bouncer was like both a fighting game and an anime movie. I remember being so impressed by the smoothness of the visuals and the character models. There's so many long dramatic cutscenes in the game, and to be honest, having played it again recently, it doesn't really hold up. Not with what we're spoiled with these days. It's very button mashy but still very fun. But my god, there was something about this game that just kept me coming back time and time again. Even now, talking about the game, I feel the urge to go back and play it. Basically, there's 3 characters to pick from. Sion is the moody hero, Volt is the bruiser, and Ku was like this flashy punk. And the idea is that you are defending the nightclub Fate. The plot is absolutely absurd, but the combat was where this game shone. It was like 3D Streets of Rage, which was, I don't know, it felt so fresh and like, just give me that, I wanted that. But you know those games where like each individual part of it doesn't excel, but like the sum of its parts is something that just hangs on to you, it like clings to you. That's what The Bouncer is. It feels like a B-movie fever dream, but that's also what makes it strangely appealing and memorable. For the right player, there's a certain charm that's buried within its like overblown presentation. Number 6 is Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil. I'm sure I've spoke about it on the channel before, but Klonoa 1 was actually the first game I ever finished as a child. I had it on a copied CD. I didn't even know what it was when I first put it into my PlayStation 1. It was just in a box of games that my dad had created on the PC. But as a young child, I'd grown up on platforming games, and Klonoa, even at the time, the first one, felt like I'd found this gem that other people didn't know about. Turns out it was actually a pretty popular game on the PS1. On the PS2 though, I'm not sure that it was. I don't know if it fell by the wayside because it was still, I mean, it was a 2.5D platformer, but it was still a side scroller essentially. And I guess at the time, I think 3D platforming had really taken off. Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, all of those kind of games. By the PS2 era, we also had things like Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank. I think they were kind of the focus for the platforming world, and therefore Klonoa 2 just kind of fell into obscurity. But now we live in an age where 2D platforming is fine again, is well back in. And this is a classic 2.5D platformer with real heart. Klonoa, the floppy-eared dream traveler, is guided through these surreal, dreamlike worlds filled with floating platforms, comic book style jump pads, and puzzle-based progression that almost feels musical in its rhythm. Every level blends whimsical charm with challenge. You're not just leaping forward, you're using clever mechanics like the wind ring to grab and toss enemies into puzzles. The art style is so good. The bright, soft colours still look great today, even on the PS2 version. For me, this was more than just a game. This was childhood memory at its core. And I think a lot of people who played this game feel the same way about it. Number 5 is Godhand. Godhand is chaos packaged in a PS2 case. It's directed by the legend that is Shinji Mikami, director of Resident Evil and creator of Resident Evil 4. He also went on to create the Evil Within games and more recently Hi-Fi Rush. This guy has a stacked list of video game hits in his repertoire, and Godhand is one of them, even if people don't talk about it as much. It's part beat 'em up, part slapstick comedy. You play as Gene, a guy blessed or cursed with the legendary Godhand. You use it to pummel demons in ridiculously over-the-top battles. The combat is actually tough as nails. It's fucking hard, but it's also absurd. You'll spank enemies, unleash wrestling moves, and face off against gorillas in Mexican wrestling masks. At launch, critics were split. People called it terrible. Some people called it amazing. I am on the amazing side. Certainly, for those who it clicked with, Godhand became one of the PS2's most beloved cult classics. Oh, shit. At the time. And a haircut booked in. But we're back. Number 4 is Dark Cloud. Dark Cloud was Level 5's debut title, and it made a bold first impression. Level 5 being now more famously tied up in the Professor Layton games. However, they did make the Ni no Kuni series, which is definitely considered a cult classic. And personally, I think they need to revisit the Dark Cloud series. Dark Cloud is half dungeon crawling RPG, half city builder. It's got a really cool and interesting concept, and some things that were, well, at least feel like they were beyond their time. People talk about procedural generation now within modern games in roguelikes and roguelites, but this was a procedurally generated dungeon crawler way back in 2002. So the game mechanics work by you fighting through these dungeons to collect these orbs called... what the fuck are they called again? Atla, that's what they're called. And basically, these orbs contain literal pieces of the world, houses, trees, even people. Then in diorama mode, you utilize these orbs that you've collected to rebuild the world piece by piece. It's quirky and it's ambitious and it's like endlessly charming. There is a frustrating weapon durability system, but actually, whilst frustrating when you're playing it, it actually adds to the game. But the combination of adventuring and world building brought like a level of unique gameplay and a distinct identity that still feels fresh today, which is why it's a surprise to me that this franchise hasn't been brought back. I mean, look how successful Cult of the Lamb was, and that was kind of a similar situation. It's dungeon crawling, adventuring, combat combined with Animal Crossing social simulation. Personally, I think they're sitting on a gold mine. Number 3 is Vampire Knight. Before motion controllers, before VR headsets, we had the light gun shooter. And the PlayStation 2 era was really the last era of light gun games in the home anyway. And that's because the early 2000s were like the dying days of the CRT TV, or at least glass paneled TVs. And the light gun relied on the reflection from the glass panels in order to calibrate where the shots were going. So light guns didn't work on flat screen LCD TVs. And when people think of light gun games, we talk about House of the Dead, we talk about Time Crisis, we don't talk about Vampire Knight, but it fucking slapped. Developed by Sega and Namco, it is pure arcade action. Playing 2-player, you and your partner would blast gothic monstrosities, vampires, ghouls, in just complete over-the-top fashion. The environments in this game are just drenched in intentionally exaggerated atmosphere, full of castles and crypts, like a terrible vampire movie. It's not subtle and it's not deep, but it's ridiculously fun, especially if you were the proud owner of a gun con, which just made it feel like arcade at home. In fact, I go as far as to say this is really the only way to play this game. I don't know if you've ever tried playing a light game with the controller. it ain't it. For fans of that old school trigger happy chaos, Vampire Knight is still worth dusting off. Number 2 is Killer 7. To be honest, this is the fucking wackiest game I've ever played. And I've played Off and Undertale. And yeah, that pretty much covers it. It's one of those games that feels like more than that. It feels like an experience. It's a surreal action shooter dripping in symbolism and chaotic violence. You play as Harmon Smith, or rather his 7 assassin personalities. Each personality has a unique set of abilities and weapons. The story's fragmented, dreamlike, and intentionally confusing, mixing things like politics, conspiracy, and nightmare imagery into something truly special. Stylistically, it's striking. The cel-shaded visuals with the just bizarre sound design make it feel like an art film crossed with a video game. It was divisive when it launched. I don't think a lot of people got it. I don't think a lot of people would still get it. It's not an easy game to connect with, but its haunting style and experimental storytelling has like grown in appreciation over the years since its release. And if you haven't checked it out, it's definitely worth a play. And number 1 in the list is Aggressive Inline. If you were a kid in the early 2000s, extreme sports games were at their absolute peak. SSX Tricky, Shaun White snowboarding, Matt Hoffman Pro BMX, and right at the top of that list was the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. One that was a little more obscure, but in my opinion, just as good, if not even better in some ways, was Aggressive Inline. Aggressive Inline came out of nowhere. I remember being at my friend Greg's house, and he had it on the GameCube, and I was like, what is this? The levels were massive. Compared to the Tony Hawk's games, which is what I was used to at the time, levels were insanely big. Like, there was whole unlockable areas within levels that were as big as standard Tony Hawk's levels. The levels had verticality to them. You could explore the levels at your own pace. You weren't on these time limiters like you were on Tony Hawk's. Instead of those strict time limits, it just gave you these massive open levels to explore at your own pace, and you had this juice meter that was filled by doing the standard tricks in the game. And tricks weren't just about points, they fueled your juice meter, which allowed you to chain combos together that pushed the limits of what skating games were doing at the time. The freedom and flow made it stand out from the crowd for me. And because inline skating really wasn't ever as popular as skateboarding, still isn't to this day, it never reached the heights of fame that the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games did. But personally, I still, to this day, praise that game as one of, if not the boldest take on the extreme sports genre. So there you have it. Dust off your PS2. That's 10 games for you to try. There's got to be at least some on that list that you haven't played. Each of these games didn't win awards, they didn't top charts, but they did something else. For me, something deeper. They're different, they're weird, they didn't pander, they didn't apologize. And that's the magic of hidden gems, folks. Not flashy, but quietly unforgettable. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Please consider leaving a like. It helps me out so much. Comment if you've played any of these games. Comment if you're gonna play any of these games. And of course, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It means the world. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.